today we're doing a book recommendation of the year, and I have a stack of books here that I have right now which I would like to recommend, but I also have a couple of them which I borrowed from the library which I already returned, in which I will insert a screenshot of the cover on the screen so you can see what it looks like. First I have on top is a book that we learned in English this year. It's called So You've Been Publicly Shamed. Can't speak. It is a non-fiction book where the author interviews different people who has been shamed online. Very violent and critical part of ourselves when we kind of unite together on the internet and trying to pull people down when they did something wrong. And I find his writing style very easy to read. He's also very funny at a lot of the times, so it's an interesting read if you are interested in the topic of why people behave a certain way when they're together and the internet world. Second one, also one we learned in English class, called The Girl with the Louding Voice. It's a very recent book published in 2020, I believe, and it is a book about a Nigerian girl who escaped her hometown after she was married to a husband by her father, and she ran away into another city in which someone that she knew here kind of helped her to go into the big city. However, she became a domestic slave, but in that process she was able to find hope and find people who care for her, and finds an opportunity for her to get her education to inspire the next generations of different kinds of young people who doesn't have the opportunity for education. But I do think that it does have some very disturbing scenes of sexual violence and violence in general. There you go. Next one is the one that one of the books that I finished very recently. It's called Our Souls at Night, and it has become one of my favorite books I've ever read. First of all, because it's so simplistic, the writing style. I can flick a page for you to see. There's a lot of dialogues between the two main characters, and it's kind of a description of what they're saying, and the plot's kind of descriptive, but it's so simple and easy to understand and has a certain warmth in how the author describes their kind of everyday activities. Because it's about one old woman and one old man trying to find a company after all their family either died or or are going off, like their children are going off to other cities, and so they feel lonely and they try to find a new future together full of new challenges and changes and hopes. So give this a go. This also has a film apparently, but I just don't think it's as good as no assumption made, but I just don't think movies usually beat the book, because when you read words, you generate images that are personal to you in your head, and to me that's one of the biggest reasons why I love reading books, because you can see other people's perspectives, but then it's through your own experiences almost. Next one is a non-fiction book about Bauhaus. I really should have read this a long time ago because it's clearly a very important part of art history and history in general, and takes through kind of how the Bauhaus school started, how different artists and teachers and students participated in the process, and how it died or disappeared in the end because of the Nazi regime. But it really is so inspiring, because I think the most biggest takeaway of this period of time of art history is that it innovated art education, because the biggest aim of the creator's manifesto is that different types of artists and craftsmen should work together to create art in a collaborative way. And that it really helped architecture and industrial design because the main aim of most of the, furnitures and architecture and art pieces designed is really its most basic function, and form follows function. So how it looks, the simplistic look, follows how well it works. You should give it a try, even if you don't want to read most of the text, because I skipped some part I wasn't really interested in. You can still find a lot of great images that you can reference or just do more research on your own on the internet. So that's a good one. So the next book is this called The Comfort of Strangers. It is a thriller, but it starts off with like a really ordinary scene when two couples goes on a trip, but then they meet this stranger, which pulls them into a very chilling and violent storyline full of desires. I've definitely, the ending is written in a way that's kind of ambiguous, but you can kind of make out what happened. I think not only it's a book that's quite thrilling, but it also talks about gender roles and what men and women want, which is something that something that I've been really kind of trying to understand, which is why I bought a new book called The Second Sex by Beauvoir. I think it's, from what I read so far, it's kind of like the Bible of feminism. And I'm not trying to label myself anyone, I just want to learn. The book arrived yesterday and I'll probably open it sometime. Next one is The Tales of the Peculiar. The Tales of the Peculiar. Okay. It's a very nicely made hardcover book. One other reason why I picked it off the shelf. But it's a book full of folklores from different parts of the world. And it has very beautiful illustration inside, created for each of the stories. I think the folklores are quite simple. Some of them gives very interesting moral stories about human desires, greed, money, and self-empowerment, I would say. Definitely recommend if you're interested in like kind of fantastical and weird stories. If you're weird, you gotta read this. This one is a very thin comic book called The Day War Came by Nicola Davies, and it's a children's and adults illustration book about how war started and how war impacts children's lives in the future. It's like 15 pages, but the images really inflict your emotions, so I definitely think you should give it a try. Next one is also another comic book called Crushing by Sophie Burrows. It's a very cute love story about two lonely people in a big city finding each other, and she also does a great job highlighting the beauty in the small things. Next one is A Brief Interviews with Hideous Men by David Foster Wallace. It is a very interesting book full of short stories of conversations that the sort of interviewer narrative, which is a woman in the story that interviews different kinds of men, and they sort of expresses their deepest desires and opinions, which can be pretty dark sometimes, but it's not in any ways trying to put men in a dark light, but rather highlighting sort of the darkness of human nature, which is also something I'm interested in. And some ideas I found in there very disturbing, but intriguing at the same time. It also, I think the book was kind of hard to read. It also has a film that takes some excerpts of the interviews and makes it into kind of a video form, which I think was much easier to understand. So I also recommend that you give that one a try. Next one, another comic book called Understanding Comics, The Invisible Art by Scott McCloud. I think it's a must read if you're interested in comics, because it really highlights the interesting things about storytelling and images and words and how they play with our mind and how it delivers messages. And the comic artist does a great, amazing job in his version of storytelling, and how his storytelling is trying to teach the readers about storytelling. So, great book. Next one, another classic, I would say. I read the Chinese version when I was a kid. It's a series called Nicola. It's about like short stories, really funny short stories about a French boy in an era, I don't remember when, but his family is middle class, and talks about his daily life and his life in school. It's quite funny, but I also just really liked how playful the illustrations were, so definitely give that one a try. And last but definitely not least is a dystopian novel written in the time of the Russian Revolution. I think it was the first, 1917, called We, and it's a dystopian, totalitarian society, and I think it served an inspiration for Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale, but I think it's like 100 times better than Handmaid's Tale. I've read that before, and it's kind of just like the ending was but the ending in We is much sort of darker. It's about this main character, which is a man seduced by a woman who unleashes all this human desires that was not allowed in the society. But in the end, something tragic happens to her, and something tragic also happens to the main character, the narrator as well. So yeah, I think it's when was 1984 written? Yeah, 1984 is written after Second World War, but this was written like around the time of First World War. So it's kind of the most earliest dystopian novels, which I've found to be one of the best. Hope you get something out of this, and I will see you in the next video. Bye. This spreadsheet of all the books that I've read from 2018 until now. I just keep the names of all the books, and the ones highlighted in green are the ones that I would definitely read again. And I also have some movies on the bottom, just I thought keep it together. So you can look here for any inspiration if you're looking for any books to read. And yeah.